Hi, it's Ileana, and today I am going to be discussing um, disclosure in the form of Oumuamua and Avi Leob. So it's gotten posted in the New Yorker, which is a huge magazine. And so they're talking about that Oumuamua is a space probe or a spaceship. And when I had remote viewed Oumuamua, what I discovered is that it's a world colonization ship and it has world engines. So basically, what's inside Oumuamua is various DNA data banks. So it's a world colonization ship that's designed to seed life on other planets. So these vaults of these data banks of DNA, it's for both humanoid life forms, for animals, for plants, for seeding different types of ETs on planets. So that's what Oumuamua was originally designed for. And it's a kind of a small-sized world colonization ship. And currently, it doesn't have the original occupants in it. It does have stasis beings from what I saw in the remote viewing, but not the original colonists. It had other beings board it and use it to get to their planets, and they're in stasis right now. So inside Oumuamua, it's a carved out planetoid ship. There's cavern systems, there's a huge lake, and there's waterfalls there as well from what I remote viewed of it and also saw when the Planetary Corporation's shuttle went out from Mars, one of the Mars bases, to Oumuamua with the scientists and some of the guards. What they couldn't do was directly board Oumuamua because it is tumbling sometimes on its velocity course. Its world engines are not functioning fully, so it's no longer going in a straight velocity like it's supposed to. Sometimes it tumbles. So what you have to do is you have to take a shuttle out from Mars that has a teleportation platform on it. And you get on the teleportation platform with a small team of people, and then you can teleport from the shuttle, get as close to Oumuamua as possible. So this is Oumuamua, this is the shuttle. So get as close to it as possible, then teleport from the platform station on the shuttle onto Oumuamua, onto the craft, and investigate the craft, what it is. So that's what they had to do in order to board Oumuamua. They couldn't directly just dock to it because it doesn't specifically have a docking port. It's a hollowed out planetary space body, a vessel that's in a cigar shape. So you can't like dock to it. You can't dock a ship to it, especially if it's tumbling, because its world engines are not functioning fully. So you cannot dock to it. You have to teleport from the shuttle onto it. So that's what they had to do to get on it, to explore it. And I find this a huge part of disclosure that Avi Leob's name is mentioned in the article, and that this could be first alien visitor to our solar system, to the Milky Way galaxy. So this is huge. This is huge disclosure. So I'm just going to share the article and my thoughts on it because it's part of disclosure. So the article is in the New Yorker, like I mentioned, and it's called "Have We Already Been Visited by Aliens?" and it was written in January 18th, 2021, so it's still fresh disclosure. And it starts off with, on October the 19th, 2017, a Canadian astronomer named Robert Varick was reviewing images captured by a telescope known as Pan-STARRS 1 when he noticed something strange. So basically, it was a Canadian astronomer who noticed a cigar-shaped object called Oumuamua. The telescope is situated atop Halakala, a 10,000-foot volcanic peak on the island of Maui, and it scans the sky each night, recording the results with the world's highest definition camera. But it couldn't record what Oumuamua looked like physically. It could only record the light data, like the dimensions of it, but it couldn't zoom in on the object itself. So there's no physical images of Oumuamua. There's only drawings of it. There's no physical images, what it looks like, just hypothesis that it's a cigar-shaped object, elongated cigar-shaped object that's grayish, what the artists depicted. So because these telescopes, even if with their highest definition camera, can't see what the object looks like. It's designed to hunt for near-Earth objects, which are mostly asteroids, whose paths bring them into our planet's astronomical neighborhood, and which travel at an average velocity of some 40,000 miles an hour. The dot of light that caught Varick's attention was moving more than 4 times that speed, at almost 200,000 miles per hour. So basically, Oumuamua was moving like that, and sometimes it would tumble in its velocity, and their irregularity of that caught their eye in the telescope, its traveling trajectory. That's not normal, because comets travel like this and asteroids travel like this. They usually travel in steady lines. They don't go like this or like whoosh. They don't do that. So that's what's different about Oumuamua. The velocity and the speed of it, it's not going like slowly, it's going like whoosh. And it went around the sun, and then it went past planets and on its way out of the solar system. So basically, Varick alerted colleagues who began tracking the dot from other observatories. The more they looked, the more puzzling its behavior seemed. The object was small, with an area roughly that of a city block. It's bigger than a city block, actually. Because their telescopes can't clearly see it, it's bigger because it's a world colonization ship. It's a small one, granted, but it's bigger than what they perceive it as. As it tumbled through space, its brightness varied, so much by a factor of 10 that it had to have a very odd shape. Either it was long and skinny, like a cosmic cigar, or flat and round, like a celestial pizza. It's neither, actually. It's a long, elongated cigar-shaped craft, but it's not skinny and it's not flat. Instead of swinging around the sun on an elliptical path, it was zipping away, more or less in a straight line. The bright dot, astronomers concluded, was something never before seen. It was an interstellar object, a visitor from far beyond the solar system that was just passing through. In the dry nomenclature of the International Astronomical Union, it became known as 1I 2017 U1. More evocatively, it was dubbed Oumuamua, pronounced Oumuamua. From the Hawaiian, meaning roughly scout. Even interstellar objects have to obey the law of gravity, but Oumuamua raced along as if propelled by an extra force. Comets get an added kick thanks to the gases they throw off, which form their signature tails. Oumuamua, though, didn't have a tail, nor did the telescopes trained on it find evidence of any of the byproducts normally associated with outgassing, like water vapor or dust. This is definitely an unusual object, a video produced by NASA observed. And unfortunately, no more new observations of Oumuamua are possible because it's already too dim and far away. So even NASA's video couldn't clearly see this object. They didn't have enough of advanced technology to launch something to get near its vector to actually image it. So the artist drawings are just speculations of what it looks like based on its mass, dimension, height, and width. And how the artist drew it, it looks like a gray cigar-shaped craft. And even the article depiction shows it as a blue craft. That's what it looks like. As astronomers pored over the data, they excluded one theory after another. Oumuamua's weird motion couldn't be accounted for by a collision with another object, or by interactions with the solar wind, or by a phenomenon that's known after a 19th century Polish engineer as the Yarkovsky effect. One group of researchers decided that the best explanation was that 1I 2017 U1 was a miniature comet whose tail had gone undetected because of its unusual chemical composition. Another group argued that Oumuamua was composed mostly of frozen hydrogen. This hypothesis, a variation on the mini comet idea, had the advantage of explaining the object's peculiar shape. By the time it reached our solar system, it had mostly melted away like an ice cube on the sidewalk. But that's not a great explanation because it didn't melt. It's a huge object. It's like a planetary body object, just not in the shape of a circle, but an elongated cigar. So it couldn't have melted off because it's a solid metallic object. So that doesn't make any sense either. By far the most spectacular account of 1I 2017 U1 came from Avi Loeb, a Harvard astrophysicist. Oumuamua didn't behave as an interstellar object would be expected to, Loeb argued, because it wasn't one. It was the handiwork of an alien civilization. In an equation-dense paper that appeared in the astrophysical journal Letters a year after Verrick's discovery, Loeb and a Harvard postdoc named Shumel Bailey proposed that Oumuamua's non-gravitational acceleration was most economically explained by assuming that the object was manufactured. It might be the alien equivalent of an abandoned car floating in interstellar space as debris. Well, it's much more fancier than a car. It's a world colonization ship that has various data vaults of humanoid extraterrestrial DNA to seed life on other planets, as well as animal DNA in plants. So basically to seed life on other planets, that's what that craft was designed to do, and that's what it did up until 2 million years ago when its world engines stopped functioning because nobody was maintaining it. Or it might be a fully operational probe. It's very much more than a probe that had been dispatched to our solar system to reconnoiter. Logically speaking, I don't think it's a probe because it didn't stay to observe Earth and the other planets in our solar system. It whizzed by Earth very quickly. It didn't stay to orbit Earth to look at our planet and our species. It whizzed by around the sun and left. It didn't stay long to be a probe, because what a probe does, it literally will observe a planet for weeks at a time, looking at the consistency of a planet. Is it habitable? Is it inhabitable? What's on the planet's surface? What's underneath the planet's surface? What's in the middle of the planet? What kind of beings live on it? What is this planet? Is there any rich resources on it? And if it's habitable, what kind of beings are on the planet? What species, type, and class? How advanced are they? Are they spaceworthy? Are they out in space? Do they communicate with other beings? So that's what a space probe does. Oumuamua just whizzed by and literally looked like it sailed away. So it's not a space probe. It didn't act like a space probe. The second possibility Laob and Bailey suggested was the more likely, since if the object was just a piece of alien junk drifting through the galaxy, the odds of our having come across it would be absurdly low. It's not space junk. It's an ancient world colonization ship that's no longer functioning as it should. So that hypothesis isn't correct. Not space junk, not alien junk. In contemplating the possibility of an artificial origin, we should keep in mind what Sherlock Holmes said: when you have excluded the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. Laob wrote in a blog post for Scientific American. Oumuamua is an artificially made craft carved out of planetary type body of an elongated cigar-shaped object. So it's using technology, and it's using natural organic materials out in space they took a planetary object, which is not an asteroid or a comet, it's something different, it's still organic matter, hollowed it out and build a world colonization ship inside of it. So that's what they did. And it's camouflaged to look like a planetary body, so nobody touches it. Nobody really goes onto it. Nobody thinks twice about what it is. But Avi Laob is a guy who thinks outside the box, and he's like, that's a spaceship. That's a probe, because it's shaped obviously like a spaceship, and it acts like a spaceship because it is. So this scientist thought outside of the box, and he's quite right to think like that. Because this object is special. It's quite different. It's not a comet or an asteroid. It doesn't act like a comet or an asteroid. Not surprisingly, Laob and Bailey's theory received a lot of attention. The story raced around the world, almost at the speed of Oumuamua. TV crews crowded into Laob's office at the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics and showed up at his house. Film companies vied to make a movie of his life. Also, not surprisingly, much of the attention was unflattering. No, Oumuamua is not an alien spaceship, and the authors of the paper insult honest scientific inquiry to even suggest it. Paul M. Sutter, an astrophysicist at Ohio State University, wrote, "Can we talk about how annoying it is that Avi Laob promotes speculative theories about alien origins of Oumuamua, forcing the rest of us to do the scientific grunt work of walking back these rumors?" Benjamin Weiner, an astronomer at the University of Arizona, tweeted, "Well, it's not like their hypothesis proved that it's a comet or an asteroid. When you measure the hypothesis, none of them add up. So Laob tried to provide scientific evidence for what this object could be other than a comet or a asteroid or something that's H2O solid matter. So he thought outside the box and tried to provide another alternative theory that actually makes sense. And of course, he was ridiculed for it. How could it be aliens? It's everything but aliens. Can't be. Can't be aliens. No way, no how. But this object is not normal. So the alien theory should also be considered, since we're thinking outside the box in theories. Far from being deterred, Laob doubled down. Together with Thyme Hoyan, a researcher at the Korea Astronomy and Space Science Institute, he blasted the frozen hydrogen theory. In another equation-packed paper, the pair argued that it was fantastical to imagine solid hydrogen floating around outer space, because it doesn't. And if a frozen chunk did manage to take shape, there was no way for a block the size of Oumuamua to survive an interstellar journey. Assuming that H2 objects could somehow form, Hoyan and Laob wrote, sublimation by collisional heating would vaporize them before they had the chance to, in a matter of speaking, take off. Chunks of ice, solid ice, don't just float out in space. It would melt off on a long journey, so that didn't make sense either, and they countered that theory. Laob has now dispensed with the scientific notation and written extraterrestrial, the first sign of intelligent life beyond Earth. Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, that's the publisher of this book. In it, he recounts the oft-told story of how Galileo was charged with heresy for asserting that Earth circled the sun. At his trial in Rome in 1633, Galileo recanted and then, legend has it, muttered sotto voce, a pure sea, Moab, and yet it moves. So it's like hypothesizing that the Earth is flat, that conspiracy theory, which isn't true. The Earth is not flat. When you look through telescopes, planetary bodies that we see, like the moon, Mars, Venus, Saturn, they're round spherical orbs, round planetary bodies. They're not flat. And what you see through just a telescope, you even buy a homemade telescope, planetary bodies are not flat. They're round and circular, like spheres or orbs. So there's evidence, hardcore evidence, that planets are not flat. They're not one-dimensional. They're 3D dimensional, just like they look like. That's fact. It's not a conspiracy theory that Earth is flat. It just doesn't vibe. There's nothing there to prove that the Earth is flat, because it's not. That's not what you see in a telescope. The moon isn't flat. So the theory that there's a flat Earth, it doesn't make sense, because the horizon is not flat. It's continual. There's nothing flat about planetary bodies. So basically, Laob acknowledges that the quote is probably apocryphal. Still, he maintains it's relevant. The astronomical establishment may wish to silence him, but it can't explain why Oumuamua strayed from the expected path, and yet it deviated, he observes. In Extraterrestrial, Laob lays out his reasoning as follows. The only way to make sense of Oumuamua's strange acceleration without resorting to some sort of undetectable outgassing is to assume that the object was propelled by solar radiation, essentially photons bouncing off its surface. And the only way the object could be propelled by solar radiation is if it were extremely thin, no thinner than a millimeter, with a very low density and a comparatively large surface area. Yes, Oumuamua has a large surface area, but it's not flat and it's not thin. It has quite a bit of mass to it, which makes it a world colonization ship. So it's not a solar sail, and it's not a probe. It's much more than that. Such an object would function as a sail, one powered by light rather than by wind. The natural world doesn't produce sails, people do. Thus, Leob writes, Oumuamua must have been designed, built, and launched by an extraterrestrial intelligence. Yes, it was, but it's not thin and it's not a light sail or a solar sail. It's much bigger than that. It's not flat. There's more mass to it than what the measurements pick up. The first planet to be found circling a sun-like star was spotted in 1995 by a pair of Swiss astronomers, Michel Mayor and Dieter Qualis. Its host star, 51 Pegasi, was in the constellation Pegasus, and so the planet was formally dubbed 51 Pegasi b. By a different naming conversion, it became known as Diadem. Diadem was the Oumuamua of its day, a fantastic discovery that made headlines around the world. For their work, Mayor and Qualis were eventually awarded a Nobel Prize. The planet turned out to be very large, with a mass about 150 times that of Earth. It was wiping around its star once every 4 days, which meant that it had to be relatively close to it and was probably very hot, with a surface temperature of as much as 1,800 degrees. Astronomers hadn't thought such a large body could be found so close to its parent star and had to invent a whole new category to contain it. It became known as a hot Jupiter. Mayor and Qualis had detected Diadem by measuring its gravitational tug on 51 Pegasi. In 2009, NASA launched the Kepler Space Telescope, which was designed to search for exoplanets using a different method. So basically, when looking for exoplanets, they're looking for planets in the habitable zone that can be inhabited by living beings. So the closer the planet is to its star, the sun, the hotter it is. The further out it is, in a nice middle ground, the more balanced it is, the more likely it's to have oceans and land masses. The more likely it's to have an atmosphere, a breathable atmosphere, where there could be life sustained on such a planet. And it has to be within a habitable zone, not too close to the star, not too far out from the star, a nice middle balance. So that's kind of what exoplanets are, and how it's looking for them in the habitable zone. When a planet passes in front of its star, it reduces the star's brightness very slightly. During the last transit of Venus in 2012, viewers on Earth could watch a small black dot creep across the sun. Kepler measured variations in the brightness of more than 150,000 stars in the vicinity of the constellations Cygnus and Lyra. By 2015, it had revealed the existence of 1,000 exoplanets. By the time it stopped operating in 2018, it had revealed 1,600 more. So there's a lot of exoplanets and a lot of possibility for sentient life forms to be on them. And many of these habitable zone planets are inhabited by sentient beings that have the typical form of humanoid ETs. The head, 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, ears. Although the ears could be differently shaped, still typical. 2 arms, 2 legs, The fingers, more fingers, less fingers, that can vary. Skin color, hair color, eye color, height can vary. There's a lot of humanoid type ET species who are very tall, taller than the typical humanoid, 6 foot something. So there's a lot of variation in how many humanoid type species there are in the universe. But the humanoid form, that's typical. It's very typical. There are variations. Maybe somebody has 2 heads and a tail, but that would have to be a very different star system. Something like a binary star, something to do with the sun being very different than ours, to have a very different variation of beings, where the evolution doesn't look like the standard humanoid type that's bipedal. NASA's ultimate goal for the telescope was to work out a figure known as eta Earth, or N plus circle. This is the average number of rocky, roughly Earth-sized planets that can be found orbiting an average sun-like star at a distance that might conceivably render them habitable, in the comfortable habitable zone. After spending 2 years analyzing the data from Kepler, researchers recently concluded that N plus circle has a value somewhere between 0.37 and 6. Since there are at least 4 billion sun-like stars in the Milky Way, this means that somewhere between 1.5 billion and 2.4 billion planets in our galaxy could, in theory, harbor life. Those are huge numbers. No one knows what fraction of potentially habitable planets are, in fact, inhabited. But even if the proportion is trivial, we're still talking about millions, perhaps tens of millions of planets in the galaxy that might be teeming with living things. At a public event a few years ago, Ellen Stofan, who at the time was NASA's chief scientist and is now the director of the National Air and Space Museum, said that she believed definitive evidence of life beyond Earth would be found sometime in the next 2 decades. It's definitely not an if, it's a when, Jeffrey Newmark, a NASA astrophysicist, said at the same gathering. What will life on other planets look like when, not if, it's found? Eric Kirschenbaum, a researcher at the University of Cambridge, takes up this question in The Zoologist's Guide to the Galaxy. What animals on Earth reveal about aliens and ourselves? And it's by Penguin Press. It's a popular belief that alien life is too alien to imagine, he writes. I don't agree. Again, the typical humanoid ETs have 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, eyes, nose. The nose might be less prominent or more, a mouth. Some speak, some don't really speak. There's more telepathy involved. Some have bigger brains than we do, bigger bodies, but 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head, that's a typical humanoid ET species appearance. So I agree with Kirschenbaum. Aliens are not too far exotic. There are some, but mostly they look like us, but they could have different variations of skin color, hair color, height, and different abilities as well. From this premise, Kirschenbaum says, it follows that life on other planets will have evolved, if not along the same lines as life on this planet, then at least along lines that are generally recognizable. On Earth, for instance, where the atmosphere is mostly made of nitrogen and oxygen, feathers are a useful feature. On a planet where clouds are made of ammonia, feathers probably wouldn't emerge. But we should not be surprised to find the same functions, example flight, that we observe here. Similarly, Kirschenbaum writes, alien organisms are apt to evolve some form of land-based locomotion. Life on alien planets is very likely to have legs, as well as some form of reproduction, analogous to sex and some way of exchanging information. Aliens in the dark will click like bats and dolphins, and aliens in the clear skies will flash their colors at each other. Assuming that there is in fact alien life out there, most of it seems likely to be microscopic. We are not talking about little green men, is how Stefan put it when she said we were soon going to find it. We are talking about little microbes, but Kirschenbaum, who studies animal communication, jumps straight to complex organisms, which propels him pretty quickly into Laovian territory. And Kirschenbaum is right. There's much more sentient life out there than simply microbes or amoeba. There's a lot of highly evolved beings out there. They're just not making themselves known to us because they don't think we're highly evolved. We're not even on the Kardashev level 1 scale, where we're barely out in space. We still have hunger, we still have famine, we still have pollution, we still have wars, and we're still considered primitive somewhat, because again, our countries have borders. There's so many different governments that can't agree on anything. There's still hunger, there's still inequality and greed. So not everyone is equal. So if aliens did land on Earth, they would likely be grabbed by black ops operations, shadow governments experimented on, tortured, and dissected to see how they tick. They wouldn't be coming here with open arms. Here, we welcome you, and we're going to tell the people that you came. That's not how this works. That's why advanced civilizations don't openly come out and tell us that they exist, because they don't want to be terrorized. They don't want to be tortured and locked up somewhere underground and experimented on. It's dangerous. They don't want to come here. They think we're insignificant. We're still very much primitive and very warlike and dangerous beings who use nuclear weapons to destroy each other, cause wars and famine and plagues and other things, bioweapons. No advanced civilization wants to come and experience that on a planet and beings that are still evolving. We're not even one on the Kardashev scale of an advanced civilization. Kardashev scale goes from 1 to 5 in advancements. We're not even at the spacefaring level. We have not gone out into space and explored space. We're still learning how to be civilized. That's at the level where we are. The secret space programs are at a higher level than that, but they're not being disclosed to us. On Earth, many animals possess what we would broadly refer to as intelligence. Kirschenbaum argues that, given the advantages that this quality confers, natural selection all across the galaxy will favor its emergence, in which case there should be loads of life forms out there that are as smart as we are, and some that are a whole lot smarter. This, in his view, opens up quite a can of interstellar worms. Are we going to accord aliens human rights? Will they accord us whatever rights, if any, they grant their little green or silver or blue brethren? I don't agree with that sarcastic tone. Most aliens are not green little men. That's just a stereotype. A lot of ETs are very tall, so this is quite sarcastic. Such questions, Kirschenbaum acknowledges, are difficult to answer in advance without any evidence of what kind of legal system or system of ethics the aliens themselves might have. As disconcerting as encountering intelligent aliens would be, the fact that we haven't yet heard from any is arguably even more so. Why this is the case is a question that's become known as the Fermi paradox. And it's not so disconcerting because most advanced ET species think we're quite insignificant. We're just ants on a faraway, distant planet doing our thing. We're not super evolved to that level where they think we're ready for contact and they don't interfere with us. They have a non-interference act. They don't interfere with still evolving species. We're pretty much ready for contact. Those of us who are awake and awakening, we're ready. We already know ETs exist. So for us, this disclosure is just adding to a broader disclosure picture, information trickling in. One day in 1950, while launching at Los Alamos National Laboratory, the physicist Enrico Fermi turned to some colleagues and asked, "Where are they?" At least this is how one version of the story goes. According to another version, he asked, "But where is everybody?" This was decades before Pan-STARRS 1 and the Kepler mission. Still, Fermi reckoned that Earth was a fairly typical planet revolving around a fairly typical star. There ought, he reasoned, to be civilizations out there far older and more advanced than our own, some of which should have already mastered interstellar travel, yet strangely enough, no one had shown up. Much human intelligence has since been devoted to grappling with Fermi's question. In the 1960s, an astronomer named Frank Drake came up with the eponymous Drake equation, which offers a way to estimate, or if you prefer, guesstimate, how many alien cultures exist with which we might hope to communicate. Key terms in the equation include how many potentially habitable planets are out there, what fraction of life-hosting planets will develop sophisticated technology, and how long technologically sophisticated civilizations endure. As the list of potentially habitable planets has grown, the "where are they" mystery has only deepened. At a workshop on the subject held in Paris in 2019, a French researcher named Jean-Pierre Raspars proposed that aliens haven't reached out to us because they're keeping Earth under a galactic quarantine. They realize, he said, that it would be culturally disruptive for us to learn about them. Yeah, that's true in some ways. They don't deem us highly advanced enough to not cause wars, to not interfere with other species. If we can't clean up our own planet and we're still using fossil fuels, we're still using nuclear weapons, we still have pollution, we still have droughts, hunger, famine, catastrophes on this planet. So if we haven't used clean energy sources to clean up our own messes, why would they visit us? Why would they come to a corrupted planet where shadow governments rule with dictatorship? Like, that's not ethical to them. Until we clean up our planet and start using clean energies, and that's openly distributed to us, we're still evolving. Fossil fuels and nuclear weapons are old technology that's so outdated. Clean energy is how most ETs live. They don't use fossil fuels. They don't use rockets. They don't burn fuel. They don't use nuclear weapons to destroy each other. Everybody just cohabitates peacefully, minding their own business on their own planets. And if there's exploration, they have treaty agreements to explore space and not be bothered. So they're waiting for us to move up on the evolutionary scale of advanced civilization on the Kardashev scale. That's what they're waiting for in order to make contact with us. Lyot proposes that Fermi may be the answer to his own paradox. Humanity has been capable of communicating with other planets via radio wave for only the past 100 years or so. 75 years ago, Fermi and his colleagues on the Manhattan Project invented the atomic bomb. And a few years after that, Edward Teller, one of Fermi's companions at the lunch table at Los Alamos, came up with the design for a hydrogen bomb. Those are weapons of mass destruction. Thus, not long after humanity became capable of signaling to other planets, it also became capable of wiping itself out. What race wants to visit a planet that could potentially wipe them out in itself in a nanosecond with nuclear weapons and atomic bombs? Doesn't make sense. Since the invention of nuclear weapons, we've continued to come up with new ways to do ourselves in. These include unchecked climate change and manufactured microbes. Yeah, we have bioweapons now. It's turned into a mass pandemic. It's real. It's there. It was bioengineered. That's a fact. So it's going into biowarfare, not just atomic bombs and nuclear weapons. It's much more sophisticated and advanced now. It is quite conceivable that if we are not careful, our civilization's next few centuries will be its last, Lyot warns. Yeah, that's true. We need to clean up our own planet. We need to get energy, clean energy, technology, for that to be made openly accessible to us so we can advance as a civilization. Alien civilizations with the technological prowess to explore the universe are, he infers, similarly vulnerable to annihilation by self-inflicted wounds. Perhaps the reason no one has shown up is that there's no one left to make the trip. That's not true. There's many advanced alien civilizations that have moved up on the Kardashev scale, so they're capable of visiting us. They're just waiting for us to evolve. This would mean that Oumuamua was the cosmic equivalent of a potsherd, the product of a culture now dead. I don't think they're dead. They're just now using more advanced technology and no longer using Oumuamua. So I don't think they're necessarily dead. They're just using more advanced technology and no longer using hollowed out planetary bodies. There's more advanced world colonization ships now that have cloaking technology, and they don't require to be hollowed out planetoids. A message an Earthling might take from this admittedly highly speculative train of thought is, be wary of new technologies. Lyot, for his part, draws the opposite conclusion. He thinks humanity ought to be working to produce precisely the kind of photon-powered vessel that he imagines Oumuamua to be. To this end, he's an advisor on a project called the Breakthrough Starshot Initiative, whose started aim is to demonstrate proof of concept for ultra-fast, light-driven nanocrafts. In the longer term, the group hopes to lay the foundations for a launch to Alpha Centauri, the star system closest to Earth, which is about 25 trillion miles away. The initiative has funding from Yuri Milner, a Russian-Israeli billionaire, and counts among its board members Mark Zuckerberg. Now, this isn't a coincidence. Both Israeli and Russian figures have come out of the woodwork, like Chaim Eshed who's an Israeli professor, scientist, and he was the head of the space agency, of the Israeli Space Agency. He's come out and said that there's a galactic federation that's working with US military and the US government on joint agreements and projects in genetics, that this agreement has been in place for a long time, and they have a co-joint base underground on Mars. Haim Eshed just came out with that recently. So he's Israeli. Yuri Milner is Russian. And Avi Loeb is originally from Israel as well. So I don't think it's a coincidence. I won't even talk about Mark Zuckerberg. Loeb also looks forward to the day when we'll be able to produce synthetic life in our laboratories. He specifically said, produce synthetic life in our laboratories, seeding life on other planets. From there, he imagines Gutenberg DNA printers that could be distributed to make copies of the human genome out of raw materials on the surface of other planets, seeding other worlds with our own image of humanoid ETs. And at some point, we are going to be doing that, and we are already doing that in the SSPs. By sending the galaxy with our genetic material, he says, by seeding the galaxy with our genetic material, we could, he suggests, hedge our bets against annihilation. I find this sentence very interesting. Zooming in on it, again, repeating it. By seeding the galaxy with our genetic material, we could, he suggests, hedge our bets against annihilation. This is not a new concept. It's already been done. Many planets have been seeded with various genetics of many different ETs who have contributed to creating us and other species, tinkering with our DNA, evolving us, advancing us, devolving us in some occasions. That's been done too. We could also run a great evolutionary experiment, one that might lead to outcomes far more wondrous than seen so far. There is no reason to expect that terrestrial life, which emerged under random circumstances on Earth, was optimal, Loeb writes. When I was a kid, one of my favorite books was Chariots of the Gods by Eric von Daniken. The premise of the book, which was spun off into the TV documentary In Search of Ancient Astronauts, narrated by Rod Sterling, was that Fermi's question had long ago been answered. They had already been here. They had already been here. Von Daniken, a Swiss hotel manager turned author, who for some reason in the documentary was described as a German professor, argued that aliens had landed on Earth sometime in the misty past. So von Daniken subscribes to the ancient astronauts theory, and that's become quite popular on the Ancient Aliens show, where sometimes they have some interesting scientific hypothesis trying to prove that ancient aliens and ancient astronauts had visited us in the near past and ancient Earth. So that show is 50-50. Sometimes they have really good scientific information, and sometimes they're way off the basis. Really depends on who's being featured and what the production like is on that show. Traces of their visits were recorded in legends and also in artifacts like the Nazca lines in southern Peru. Why had people created these oversized images if not to signal to beings in the air? I figured that von Daniken would be interested in the first official interstellar object, so I got in touch with him. Now 85, he lives near Interlaken, not far from a theme park he designed, which was originally called Mystery Park and then later, after a series of financial mishaps, rebranded as Jungfrau Park. The park boasts 7 pavilions, one shaped like a pyramid, another like an Aztec temple. Van Daniken told me that he had indeed been following the controversy over Oumuamua. He tended to side with Laob, who he thought was very brave. He needs courage, and obviously he had courage, he said. No scientist wants to be ridiculed, and whenever they deal with UFOs or extraterrestrials, they are ridiculed by the media. But he predicted the situation will change. Yes, the situation very much has changed because the US Navy and the government have officially disclosed that UFOs are a real phenomenon. They're not exactly sure what it is, but it's real, and it's in our Earth skies. There's leaked videos of sophisticated UFOs flying in airspace where the US Navy are doing drills on ocean military ships. There's air jets, fighter jets flying in the sky doing drills, and there's UFOs whizzing by at fast speeds. You can't clearly see what it is on your radar. So that's been disclosed, and that's a real phenomenon. So both print media, social media, alternative media, and news media are talking about UFOs. They're talking about Avi Loeb. He's a galactic superstar. They're talking about Oumuamua. This is a hot topic. Ufology is hot. It's popular again. It's everywhere. It's often said that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The phrase was popularized by the astronomer Carl Sagan, who probably did as much as any scientist has done to promote the search for extraterrestrial life. By what's sometimes referred to as the Sagan standard, Loeb's claim clearly falls short. The best evidence he marshals for his theory that Oumuamua is an alien craft is that the alternative theories are unconvincing. Loeb, though, explicitly rejects the Sagan standard. It is not obvious to me why extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. He observes and flips its logic on its head. Extraordinary conservatism keeps us extraordinarily ignorant. I think what he means is those that don't have enough creativity and imagination don't take the risk. Do not take the risk. They don't take the risk of thinking outside the box for fear of being slapped on the wrist if they make hypotheses that don't fit the standards of the scientific community about space objects, about UFOs, etc., phenomenon that you can't easily explain. So Loeb explicitly rejects the Sagan standard. It is not obvious to me why extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, he observes, and flips its logic on its head. Extraordinary conservatism keeps us extraordinarily ignorant. And yes, that's quite true. So long as there's a chance that 1I 2017 U1 is an alien probe, we'd be fools not to pursue the idea. If we acknowledge that Oumuamua is plausibly of extraterrestrial technology origin, he writes, whole new vistas of exploration for evidence and discovery open before us. So basically, if you think outside the box, you can get more ideas of what things could be, not what they are not or are. Imagination is life's creation. So thinking outside the box can give you more interesting theories, more potentials, more variables than being so conservative, so closed-minded scientifically. So I do tend to agree with Leob on that. If you're creative scientifically, informationally, and you think outside the box, you can create more solutions. You can find more opportunities for creativity and achievement in life because you're open-minded to many interesting ideas and what could be in reality, not just closed off and static. And just like it is what it is, it can't be anything else. Evolution evolves every minute, it doesn't stay stagnant. In publishing his theory, Leob has certainly risked and suffered ridicule. It seems a good deal more likely that extraterrestrial will be ranked with von Daniken's work than with Galileo. Still, as Sterling notes toward the end of In Search of Ancient Astronauts, it's thrilling to imagine the possibilities. Look up into the sky some clear starlit night and allow yourself the freedom to wander. Think outside the box. Honestly, I think the book Extraterrestrial is going to be a superstar, and Avi Leob is getting a lot of attention. He's being interviewed by many YouTube content creators. He's on radio shows. He's even been interviewed for The New Yorker. This man is popular. His theories are popular, and I don't think that's going away anytime soon because people want to know more about Oumuamua and other objects like it. People want disclosure that there's alien technology out there, there's aliens out there, there's extraterrestrials. We want full disclosure of that and much, much more. That's a small part of disclosure, but there's so much more to that than just this. But this is a huge part of current disclosure events about Oumuamua. And it's an alien craft of some sort. So it's the relevant it news right now. So I just wanted to discuss this a little bit and talk about what's going on in the ufology disclosure right now and discuss this interesting topic. So thank you so much. And I appreciate this.